Morning. We are joined by our political analyst, Sandeep Kaushik. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us once again this morning. And one of the most watched races is the race for Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell, leading right now. He's the establishment candidate, I guess you can say, compared to Katie Wilson. What does this tell us about the overall voter sentiment heading into this election for Seattle Mayor?
Well, I'll tell you, we are city divided, right? Whichever way this turns out in the end, this is a really close race, right? It's razor thin margin, but yeah, we expect it to tighten up as the count comes in, and it really shows that even though we're a very blue city, it's what shade of blue you are. Are you a kind of Bruce Harrell blue, or are you Katie Wilson, who's a self-described socialist kind of blue? And that's really the divide in the city right now.
So for the first time in over a decade, voters in King County electing a new executive. Too close to call. Gurmai Zahalai has a slight lead there. He and Claudia Balducci agree on policy generally, but their strategies are slightly different. How do you see this race coming out? Because it's too close to call right now.
It is too close to call right now. Gurmai Zahalai has a slight lead. And if you look at what happened in the primary, you would expect his lead will grow as the later counts come in and we see a kind of shift in King County towards a little bit more progressive voters. He seemed to have dominated with those sorts of voters, so I would expect he's in a pretty good place right now.
There was a statewide resolution on the ballot, 8201, passing. Now, that's an amendment which would allow the state to invest money from the long-term care fund, the Washington Cares Fund, into stocks of private companies. This has been on the ballot before. It did not pass. Looks like it's going to this time around. What does this mean, and could we see, funds being used in this way for, other buckets of money?
Potentially. I mean, I think that the desire to do this was really driven by the Home Care Workers Union, who were behind the original initiative that created this public home care system. And to really make the economics of it work out, they really feel like you need to get better returns on the money that's going into it. They put a lot of money behind the campaign to get this passed this time, and there wasn't really a campaign on the other side, so I think they were able to bring voters over and convince them to do it. And yeah, I mean, I think it raises questions about if this is successful, about whether there's other opportunities to take public funds and put them in the private markets to get better returns.
It was an off-year election, not huge voter turnout numbers, but we expect to see much larger numbers, obviously, for the midterm. What do you expect to see in terms of overall turnout for the midterm?
Yeah, well, the midterm, I think, will be hotly contested next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see big turnout. There's a lot of, particularly around here, there is a lot of anti-Trump energy that is bubbling under the surface. People on the Democratic side, people on the blue side of the divide, really feel like they're under attack from the Trump administration. He's sort of put the bullseye on blue cities. That's going to drive turnout in the midterms. I think turnout in this election will end up being about average, not as big as it was 4 years ago when we had a really high turnout election, but we'll probably get to kind of somewhere around normal, about 50%.
It was a really good night for Democrats nationwide. Do you think that is a referendum on Trump?
It is, absolutely. Look, there is definitely some a backlash politics going on around what a lot of people perceive as the excesses of the Trump administration, that they're going too far, pushing their, right of center agenda, whether it's on how they're doing immigration raids or, the masked ICE folks, or the feeling of authoritarian turn on Trump's part, or the threats to democracy, that kind of stuff. And also the feeling that the economy hasn't really gotten better, even though he made lots of promises last year that it was all going to turn around as soon as he got into office. So I think that's all playing into it.
Sandeep Kaushik, our political analyst, we have much more to discuss with you coming up in our half hour.
All right, thank you. Well, we continue to track the results of dozens of elections across Western Washington and throughout the country this morning. That includes a few other positions that could have a big impact on our area as a whole. So a statewide issue that every Washington voter had on their ballot was Resolution 8201, and that did pass. It is an amendment which will allow the state to invest money from the Long-Term Care Fund or the Washington Cares Fund into stocks of private companies. And elsewhere in the race for Seattle City Attorney, challenger Erica Evans is leading incumbent Ann Davidson. They're separated by more than 28,000 votes. And for Seattle's Prop 1, voters approving replacing an expiring levy to fund education support services. For Seattle Prop 2, voters are headed to approve the city's business and operations tax. The reform will raise taxes on the city's biggest companies while reducing taxes for smaller ones.
Well, nationwide, it was a pretty good night for Democrats. And this morning, our political analyst, Sandeep Kaushik, is joining us once again, talking about some of the key national races last night, and maybe the biggest race that folks were watching, the New York mayoral race. Zoran Mamdani, a self-proclaimed Democratic socialist, the winner there. So what do you make of the 35-year-old beating Andrew Cuomo again to take over the lead for New York City?
Well, it's an earthquake, right? Not just in New York City, but I think it has national implications for the direction of the Democratic Party going into next year, going into 2028. There's a real debate going on right now on the Democratic side about which direction the party's going to go after the searing loss to Trump last November. You know, so you see kind of one segment of the party saying, look at Mamdani, look at this embrace of going farther left. This is the answer about energizing younger voters. That all happened in New York City. But there's counterexamples, too, in the governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia, where you saw the other wing of the Democratic Party doing very well in those races. So there's a lot of that debate is going to keep going on.
Okay, so as we look towards the midterm, then, in terms of platform and strategy, what did the Democrats need to do to solidify? Because 2024 was a real inflection point for the Dems.
It was really an inflection point, and I think, I think you're going to see different messages and kind of different arguments tested in different places in the midterms in 2026. What works in Georgia, might not work in New York. Well, what works in Washington State might not work in Arizona, right? And I think the Democratic Party is sort of coming to this realization that we're a big fractious coalition, and they're going to have to kind of figure out how to have a big enough tent to include everybody in it.
We touched on this last half hour, but the Democratic wins more a referendum on the Trump administration, you were saying, but that's not enough for the Democrats moving into the midterm.
It really is not enough. I think it's becoming clear to the party that maybe in some of these lower turnout races, maybe even in the midterms, just being anti-Trump might be enough. But if you want to win a presidential election, if you really want to take power back, if you want to win in the Senate, some of these, some of these kind of higher, higher profile races, then the party's going to have to be competitive in places where just being against Trump is not going to get you over the finish line.
Let's talk about the redistricting vote in California. The state passing this one, giving Democrats a chance to flip 5 seats. What does this mean for midterms in other states? Because we've seen Texas go the other way with Republican-favored redistricting. Yeah,
we are in a national redistricting war right now. Trump and Texas launched it off. California did it, but now Missouri, North Carolina, you're seeing red states and blue states all around the country now looking at what they can do to kind of try to swing a seat or two or several seats in their state back to their side. They're all playing games with the maps to try to kind of, put the thumb on the scales and move the votes in their favor. That's going to keep going until we get to the midterms next year.
How do you think that's all going to shake out?
Look, it looks like there will be some net advantage for Republicans in terms of the seats they gain after all of the dust settles on this. Will it be enough to overcome? Typically in a midterm election, after a president's been elected, the opposition party is favored to win that election.
Right.
So, will this redistricting stuff and the advantage the Republicans get out of it be enough to overcome that natural pull towards the Democratic side? I don't know. The Democrats I talk to nationally tell me they're still pretty optimistic about how it's going to turn out next year.
Political analyst Sandeep Kaushik, we have more to talk about in our next half hour with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.